Chapter 83. The Crown Prince used his fingertips to lightly touch the vermilion coral-like tree and asked, "What is this?" The imperial physician bowed and replied, reporting to the Crown Prince, "This tree's name is insect-devouring. It doesn't mean that it can eat insects, but because it emits a fragrance that can drive away snakes, insects, rats, and ants. This tree originally grew in Nanyang, where miasma pervaded and poisonous insects were everywhere. It was a must-have item for Nanyang merchants, but because its wood was too weak and difficult to cultivate, it has long gone extinct in recent years." The Crown Princess smelled too much of the tree's fragrance, and the leech couldn't stand it, so it had to crawl out of her nostrils and find another place to settle down. It's also fortunate that this item was sent here in time. If the leech entered her brain half a month later, I'm afraid. Realizing that he had said something wrong, the imperial physician hurriedly tried to salvage the situation. "Her Highness is indeed blessed by the heavens. This humble subject will write a few prescriptions to replenish blood and nourish qi. She will be fine after a few months of careful recuperation according to the prescriptions." "Very good. Bring me a brush and paper." The Crown Prince waved his sleeve at Song Mama, who was standing in the corner. Song Mama immediately passed him a brush, ink, paper, and inkstone. Her fingers were still trembling, clearly frightened. The Crown Prince leaned into the Crown Princess' arms and carefully sniffed the vermilion tree. He looked up and asked the Crown Princess, "Jen, check if this prince has a nosebleed." The Crown Princess was amused by him. She gently stroked his hair and said softly, "No, the Crown Prince has the bloodline of a true dragon. How can demons and monsters get close to you?" The Crown Prince's eyes darkened and he sighed, "What true dragon bloodline? It's just a body of flesh and blood." If Xiang hadn't coincidentally sent this item, who would have thought that a small insect could secretly take a person's life? That's right. Xiang is this concubine's little lucky star. Her legs are inconvenient and she was frightened. This concubine has truly mistreated her. You can make it up to her in the future. The Crown Prince tucked the Crown Princess' messy hair behind her ear. Seeing that the imperial physician had finished writing, he said softly, "This matter is sinister and strange. This prince and Yifeng must get to the bottom of this. You should settle down early. This prince will leave first." The Crown Princess also wanted to catch the culprit as soon as possible, so she did not urge him to stay. The Crown Prince left the room and gave Yu Pinyin a meaningful look. Then, he instructed the womenfolk waiting outside, "The Crown Princess is dispirited. Go in and take a look, then go back. Don't disturb her too much." The two of them went straight to the study, and the imperial physician followed closely behind with a teacup in his hand. The womenfolk acknowledged and respectfully sent off the Crown Prince and Commandant Yu. Soon after, they entered the room to take a look. Min Lan was at the front. When Su Sofei stepped over the threshold, she tripped heavily. Her calm expression instantly cracked, revealing deep panic. Nurse Song and two palace maids came out to greet them. They bent down and lifted Yu Xiang's wheelchair over the threshold. With tears in her eyes, she thanked them in a low voice, which made Yu Xiang look at her several times in confusion. The Crown Princess had already changed into a set of pure white undergarments. The cotton balls on the ground had also been cleaned. The windows on all sides were open, and a cool breeze blew in, carrying the fragrance of the vermilion tree everywhere. This scene was truly tranquil and comfortable. In addition, the Crown Princess's bright and spirited eyes looked over. There was no sign of dying at all. Min Lan could not hide his thoughts. The curve of his lips was as stiff as it could be. On the other hand, it was Su Sofei who quickly stepped forward to help the Crown Princess drink medicine. The word "joy" was written on her face. The Crown Princess's sharp gaze swept across everyone's faces. She waved her hand and sighed, "Ben Gong is tired. Xiao Jiu and Xianger, stay. Everyone else, leave." Coming to visit in the middle of the night, it has been hard on you. When Ben Gong gets better in the future, Ben Gong will definitely personally come to thank you. Everyone said they did not dare. They bowed and left in a single file. The Crown Princess's cold expression immediately warmed. She smiled and waved at the two young maidservants. Come here quickly. Were you scared today? Scared to death, quick. The two of them were indeed sisters for many years. They replied in unison, and even the way they rubbed their chests was the same. The Crown Princess's mood became more relaxed. After experiencing such a sinister scheme, she loved the simple the ninth princess and the straightforward Yuxiang to the bone. She repeatedly waved her hand and ordered Song Mama to bring 2 bowls of bird's nest for the two of them to calm their nerves. After eating the sweet bird's nest, the two of them's pale cheeks slowly flushed red. Their tightly knitted brows also relaxed. The ninth princess asked without hesitation, "Royal sister-in-law, what illness did you have? Is it really better?" "It was just a minor illness. Now that the illness has been removed, it is naturally better. This is all thanks to the worm bite that Xiang'er sent over." The Crown Princess patted Yuxiang's soft head. "Worm bite? What's that?" Yuxiang blinked her large eyes. "There, that's the worm bite. That's what the Nanyang people call it. This item can dispel illness and evil spirits. It is a rare treasure in the world." The Crown Princess pointed at the potted plant beside the bed. Yuxiang nodded in realization. There was no joy or pity on her face, which made the Crown Princess smile gently. The ninth princess put down the bowl and reached out to take the potted plant. The Crown Princess hurriedly helped her up. Song Mama and the 2 senior palace maids also raised their hands to catch her, afraid that she would accidentally drop the treasure. The ninth princess was a tactless person. She clumsily turned the potted plant and drooled, "It's so fragrant. Can it be eaten?" "It can't be eaten." The Crown Princess covered her mouth and chuckled. Yuxiang sighed, "If I'd known that this thing was so useful, I wouldn't have lowered the price when I sold it to the sea merchant. I only bought a bag of seeds for 2 taels of silver. Even though I only managed to plant this potted plant, I still got a great deal out of it." She seemed to realize that she had given such a cheap gift and even exposed it in front of her master. She coughed awkwardly and her eyes darted towards the Crown Princess' face. The Crown Princess liked Yuxiang's frankness and straightforwardness. Moreover, giving a gift was a token of her sincerity. If the gift was too expensive, she wouldn't know what to do with it. Even though this potted plant only cost 2 taels of silver, it bought her life. This kindness was enough for her to remember for the rest of her life. She immediately smiled, "It's not you who got a great deal out of it. It's me who got a great deal out of it. In the future, if I get any new plants or seeds, I'll send them to you." Yuxiang secretly sighed in relief. She was about to refuse when the loud cries of a baby came from the compartment. Having just avoided death, the Crown Princess was at her most vulnerable and emotional state. She immediately had Song Mama bring the 2 children over. The little imperial grandson's facial features had already matured. His entire body was soft and tender like a lotus root. He looked extremely adorable. The Crown Princess held one child in each hand and cried out in her heart. When she thought about how she had almost been separated from her husband and children forever because of that scoundrel, she couldn't stop her tears from falling down. The 2 children seemed to feel something. Their cries gradually quieted down and they began to babble. Their chubby little hands gently patted their mother's face. "Your Highness, don't cry. The little imperial grandson is comforting you." Song Mama handed over a handkerchief. The Crown Princess returned the children to the wet nurse and took the handkerchief to wipe her tears. When she saw the ninth princess and Yuxiang staring unblinkingly at a pair of children, she couldn't help but ask with a smile, "Do you want to hold them? Let the wet nurse teach you how to hold children. You'll be old enough in 2 years." If it wasn't someone close to her, the crown princess definitely wouldn't tease them like this. However, Yu Xiang and the ninth princess didn't blush at all. They both stretched out their hands and stared at the wet nurse. The wet nurse acted as if she was facing a great enemy. She carefully explained the correct way to hold children while carefully placing the little imperial grandson into their arms. When the children were tired from crying, they fell asleep with sparkling tears still stuck to the corners of their eyes. They smacked their little lips from time to time, making smacking sounds. Their adorable appearance was enough to melt one's heart. Yu Xiang couldn't bear to let go once she held them. She lowered her head and used the tip of her nose to gently rub the little imperial grandson's chubby cheeks that still carried a milky fragrance. She kept calling out, "Darling." Just as she was about to take a few bites, she saw a tiny black thread coming out of the little imperial grandson's nostrils. She reached out to pinch it and asked in surprise, "Your Highness, why did the little imperial grandson breathe in a thread from his nostrils? Should we call an imperial physician over to take a look?" The ninth princess also said, "Little niece also has it in her nose." The crown princess and Nurse Song's faces turned pale as if they were struck by lightning. They froze for a moment. However, Yu Xiang was even more shocked than the two of them. She had already twirled the thread between her index finger and thumb, and she found that the thread was wriggling slightly. The tip of the thread was even licking and sniffing at her fingertips, as if it was looking for a good place to bite. This wasn't a thread, it was a leech that was looking for a source of blood. Yu Xiang wasn't afraid of anything, but the thing she was most afraid of in her 2 lifetimes was insects. She felt as if her soul and body had been separated. Her body was steady as she held the little imperial grandson. She calmly said, "Crown Princess, this doesn't seem to be a thread. It's a leech. A leech has crawled into the little imperial grandson's nostrils." However, her soul frantically scratched her hair and screamed, "This is a leech. How can a leech crawl into a person's body? It's too scary. Brother, come save me." When she thought that she would turn into a stone statue, Nurse Song used a needle to remove the leech from her fingertips and put it into a teacup. Then, she lifted her skirt and hurriedly ran out of the room, shouting all the way, "Imperial physician, where is the imperial physician? Hurry and find the imperial physician." The ninth princess didn't understand what was going on. The crown princess had already snatched the child into her arms and tightly wrapped him in a blanket. She broke down and cried loudly. The room was a mess for a moment. The crown prince hurried over. He first asked the 2 young maidservants to leave the room. Then, he ordered the imperial physician to carefully examine the children's bodies. He even moved the potted plant next to the children's heads. His expression alternated between benevolent and loving, and ferocious and terrifying. No one knew what he was thinking. The moment Yu Xiang left the room, she had a palace maid bring her a basin of water. She forcefully rubbed her fingers. The sticky and slippery feeling of the worm wriggling on her fingertips couldn't be washed away. Her skin also had an inexplicable itch that she couldn't scratch. It burned her heart and lungs. The ninth princess guarded the door and refused to leave. The palace maid followed the crown prince's orders to take Miss Yu to the side hall to wait. However, Yu Xiang didn't dare to stay in the fu for long. She kept feeling that there were worms crawling everywhere and that they were about to drill into her flesh. She ordered people to carry her out of the fu. Tao Hong, Lu, who was waiting at the door, hurriedly carried her into the carriage. Seeing that her body was constantly trembling, he covered her with a thin blanket. When Yu Pinyin boarded the carriage, she saw a young girl with disheveled hair and disheveled clothes. Because of the young girl's fright, she broke out in a cold sweat. The rich fragrance of flowers wafted out along with the lifted curtain of the carriage. It made her eyes hot and her heart beat faster, and her mouth dry. The author has something to say, "Thank you to my tycoon angels, and thank you to all the friends who supported the original version. Moi." Chapter 84. Yuxiang's entire body was itchy. As soon as she got on the carriage, she pulled off her hair tie, pulled open her clothes, and scratched her head, neck, and back. If there was a board of nails in front of her, she would immediately roll onto it. Her rich imagination magnified her fear of insects to the extreme. When she saw her brother lift the curtain, the tears that she had been holding back for a long time gushed out of her eyes. She called out weakly, "Brother, I'm itchy." Yu Pinyin immediately lowered the curtain and pulled her into his arms. He asked in a hoarse voice, "Where is it itchy?" "Brother will help you scratch it." "My back is itchy." Yuxiang pointed at her back. Yu Pinyin reached out to stroke her back and asked in a low voice, "Here. A little to the left. A little to the right. Up a little, down a little." Yuxiang randomly gave instructions, and the itch became more and more unbearable. She wanted to peel off her skin to see if there was a leech hiding underneath. Moreover, she recalled the time when Chang-Chi had covered her body with insects. Perhaps a few of them had entered her body through her ears, eyes, or nostrils, just like the little imperial grandson. As she thought about it, she clung tightly to her brother's neck, her body trembling uncontrollably. Yu Pinyin found it funny and pitiful at the same time. His large palm directly reached into her clothes and gently lifted her undergarments. His hand wandered around her smooth back, carefully caressing every inch of skin. The places where his large palm slid past no longer felt itchy, but numb and comfortable. Yuxiang stopped trembling. She pulled up her sleeves to show her brother her goosebumps-covered arms. "It's itchy here too. It's unbearably itchy all over. Brother, do you know?" She leaned in very close and bit the youth's earlobe as she whispered. A leech came out of the little imperial grandson's nose. It was alive. I caught it with my own hands. She stretched out her right hand and shook it. "Here, my hand is still numb." Yu Pinyin's other hand gently rubbed her arm. He untied his outer robe and pulled her into his embrace. He rubbed her up and down, then licked her fingertips. His tongue slid under her fingernails, taking away the numbness. His hoarse voice echoed in the car. "Are you feeling better now?" Yuxiang suddenly felt her face turn red and her heart beat wildly. How could she have the mind to think about other things? She rubbed her fingertips that had been licked and nodded. After a moment of silence, she nodded again and then burrowed into her brother's robe. Yu Pinyin secretly took a deep breath. He couldn't resist the changes in his body, but he was afraid that the little girl would notice. He could only lean back and lie on his side, holding the little girl in his arms. He rubbed her head and said in a low voice, "It's late. Go to sleep." Yuxiang nodded, her hands tightly clutching his lapel. She closed her eyes and slept peacefully. But after a short while, she opened her eyes again, moaning and groaning, wriggling back and forth. Yu Pinyin grabbed her slender waist and said helplessly, "What's wrong now?" "My ears are itchy." "Big brother, help me check if there's a bug that got in," Yuxiang said as she rubbed her ear against the young man's chest. There was a series of gasps in the car. Yu Pinyin gritted his teeth and replied, "It's so dark. How can Big Brother see clearly? Bear with it for a while. When we get home and light a candle, Big Brother will help you check." "No, I have to check now. What if the bug got into my brain through my ear?" Her sweet voice sounded like she was about to cry. Yu Pinyin had no choice but to hold her head. He stuck the tip of his tongue into her ear and licked it. He carefully licked both sides of her ear and sucked on her round earlobe. After a long time, he asked while panting, "Does it still itch?" Yuxiang's heart almost stopped beating, but she restrained herself and didn't dare to think too deeply. She said in a muffled voice, "It doesn't itch anymore." After a moment of silence, she anxiously said, "Big brother, don't lick my ear next time. I heard that a centipede got into someone's ear and they were poisoned to death. What if a centipede got into my ear and bit your tongue?" Yu Pinyin was speechless. He was angry and amused at the same time. The tangled romantic fantasy in his mind instantly disappeared. He forcefully slapped the little girl's soft buttocks and scolded in a low voice, "Stop talking. It's fine if you're disgusting yourself, but don't disgust Big Brother." Yu Xiang also returned to normal and smiled proudly. Although it was already past the 5-hour mark, the Marquis household was still brightly lit. The old madam sat cross-legged on the soft couch and chanted scriptures. The members of the Lin clan and Yu Miaoqi sat next to her and frequently looked out the door. "The old lady, Master Ho and Miss are back." An old woman hurriedly ran into the main hall. The old madam's body swayed and she almost fell off the couch. Fortunately, Mama Ma's eyes were sharp and her hands were quick enough to support her. Wan Qiu hurriedly knelt down to help her put on her shoes. After tidying herself up, the old madam used her walking stick to run outside. When she saw her grandson striding in with her granddaughter, her eyes slowly turned red. "What's going on? Is Xiang'er asleep or?" "She's asleep." Yu Pinyin weighed the little girl sleeping soundly in the crook of his arm and smiled. "I was afraid that you would be worried, so I came to let you know that she's safe. I'll tell old madam the details after I send Xiang'er back to her room." "Good, good, good. It's good that she's fine. Quickly go back and rest. We can talk about it tomorrow." The old madam waved her sleeves. Yu Miaoqi tugged at the Lin clan. The Lin clan immediately asked, "Yandere, did something happen to the crown princess? Why did you also call Xiang'er over in the middle of the night?" Yu Pinyin walked towards the west wing and said in a low voice, "What could happen to the crown princess? The crown princess has already recovered and will recover in less than 2 months. How did she recover? Didn't you say that she's not going to make it?" The Lin clan was greatly surprised. Yu Pinyin ignored them and quickly disappeared into the night. The old madam looked steadily at Yu Miaoqi and sneered, "Are you planning on becoming the crown prince's second consort? Why don't you check if you have that fate? Wan Qiu, help me back." Wan Qiu complied and helped her back to her room. Yu Miaoqi obediently sent them off. When they were far away, she revealed a malicious expression and murmured, "I'm a born noble, why don't I have that fate?" The Lin clan saw that their daughter was unwilling and asked worriedly, "Cheer, could it be that you still want to become the crown prince's concubine?" Being the crown prince's second consort is different from being a concubine in other families. When the crown prince ascends the throne, I will be the imperial concubine. How can any noble lady in the capital hope to reach me? Mother, I've made up my mind. I want to marry the crown prince. Yu Miaoqi's tone was slow but firm. The Lin clan opened their mouths and sighed helplessly. If it was only the crown princess who was killed, then this matter could only be a fight within the inner chambers. Thus, the crown prince didn't dare to rashly report it to his imperial father. However, it involved the young imperial grandson's life, so the crown prince didn't dare to be careless. When the palace doors opened, he knelt outside Yangxin Palace Hall. Emperor Cheng Kong was an emperor with a strong desire for control. Otherwise, he wouldn't have set up the Dragon Scale Guard to supervise all the officials. Not only did he set down the government decrees during his reign, he also set down the policy of governing the Great Han Kingdom for 100 years after his death. The crown prince was the only prince who could strictly carry out his political ambitions. Unless the crown prince disappointed him to the point that he couldn't tolerate it, or died early, he wouldn't consider the other princes. Right now, the crown prince had given birth to a legitimate son, and he was in the prime of his life. If the crown prince died early, it would be the same for him to raise another imperial grandson. When he was old, the imperial grandson would be at his most energetic and ambitious age. Wouldn't that be perfect? Thus, the position of the crown prince's family in Emperor Cheng Kang's heart couldn't be replaced by any other prince. As for the ambitious princes, their jealousy and hatred towards the crown prince had reached an immeasurable level. The murder of the crown princess and the imperial grandson was most likely due to internal strife, and it was even more likely to be the work of the other princes. When the news reached Emperor Chen Kang's ears, he flipped the imperial table on the spot and flew into a rage. He roared and ordered Yupinyan to investigate to the end. He had heard of all kinds of methods used to harm people, and had seen even more. However, this method really touched his originally tenacious nerves. Think about it, that leech wasn't anything rare. As long as one had the heart to find it, almost everyone could find it. Just put it in your eyes, ears, mouth, and nose, and you would die without anyone knowing. Not only did it suck your blood, but it also scuttled through your blood vessels, skin, and flesh, and finally gnawed on your brain. Just thinking about this scene made one's hair stand on end. Not only was this method insidious, it was also very disgusting. A layer of goosebumps appeared all over the emperor's body. He quickly ordered the crown prince to bring the insect bites into the palace and let him and the palace concubines take turns smelling it. The crown prince didn't dare to disobey and immediately ordered someone to bring it. He thought that he would find another bag of seeds and have Xiang'e help him plant another pot. Otherwise, he wouldn't dare to sleep at night. Yu Xiang was still lazing in bed until late in the morning. If it weren't for the people from the palace coming to announce the decree, she would have lain in bed for another 4 hours. Emperor Chen Kang's chief eunuch personally announced the decree. After praising Miss 3, he rewarded her with many treasures and conferred her the title of Lord of the Rural Lands. Then, he picked and chose from Miss 3's courtyard and pulled a cart full of exotic flowers and herbs back. Immediately after, the crown prince and the crown princess's family sent people to express their thanks. The carriages carrying the gifts came and went in an endless stream. Lord of the Rural Lands was a rank that only the daughters of Zhenghua Duke and Fugua Duke were qualified to hold. Furthermore, the emperor had personally conferred the title. Their status was above all the other lords. Although they couldn't compare to the imperial clan's daughters, they were the first among the noble daughters with different surnames. After receiving the imperial decree, Yu Xiang didn't feel anything. She ate and slept as usual. However, the Lin clan and Yu Miaoqi almost fainted from anger. They originally thought that she had something to do with the crown princess' illness and that she would be in big trouble. Who would have thought that the crown princess would recover overnight and she would even be conferred the title of Lord of the Rural Lands? What exactly was the mystery behind this? The Lin clan couldn't guess, so they didn't bother. After receiving the decree, they rubbed their temples and walked back. Yu Miaoqi stopped the matriarch and asked in a low voice, "Grandmother, younger sister being conferred the title of Lord of the Rural Lands is a joyous occasion. However, you also know what her original identity was. If it was exposed one day, wouldn't our family have committed the crime of deceiving the monarch? How can a small merchant's daughter be worthy of the title of Lord of the Rural Lands?" The matriarch looked at her with dark eyes for a while and sneered, "If Xiang'e isn't worthy, do you think you are? Don't forget, you grew up in a small family Shen until you were 10 years old." She didn't expose the fact that the Celestial Empress already knew about Xiang'e's identity. Instead, she warned, "Since you know the severity of this matter, you and your mother should keep your mouths shut." With that, she walked away. Yu Miaoqi chased after her and hurriedly said, "Mother and I naturally won't speak carelessly. However, there's still the Zhao clan, Yu Siyu, and my former older brother. It's hard to say if they'll be able to keep their mouths shut." Was she planning to use the Marquis household's power to eliminate the source of the problem? She didn't leave any leeway for others. The matriarch turned back to look at her intently. In the end, she shook her head and left, leaving Yu Miaoqi standing in the same spot, gnashing her teeth in hatred. In order to investigate the Crown Prince mansion, Yu Pinyin didn't return home for 3 consecutive days. When she stepped into the house today, she saw the matriarch tossing a clean robe over and urging her, "Hurry and wash up. We're going to the Chang clan's banquet." Chang Yafu removed his clothes today. What does her removal have to do with me? Yu Pinyin raised her brows. You don't want to break off the engagement, do you? The matriarch glared at her unhappily. Chapter 85. Ever since the audit of the accounts, the Lin clan didn't dare to provoke the matriarch. They relayed the words of the Chang clan's mother and daughter and probed a bit. Seeing that the matriarch insisted on canceling the engagement, they dropped the matter. Fortunately, the matriarch was a kind person. She didn't plan on canceling the engagement on the day of her wedding, but instead set it for half a month later. She also let the Chang clan speak first, which could be considered as saving the last bit of face between the two clans. The family had prepared a few presentable gifts and arrived in a carriage for a visit. Duke Jinghua and his wife personally ran to the main gate to welcome them, their attitudes very attentive. Yu Xiang and Chang Yafu had always been filthy. When they met, they didn't see eye to eye. They curled their lips and snorted as a greeting. When they saw Chang Qi, they waved their horsewhip with murderous intent in their eyes. Duke Jinghua had already asked the emperor to grant Chang Qi the title of heir apparent, but the imperial edict hadn't been issued yet, so he was still a virgin. Although Chang Yafu was the daughter of a duke, she didn't belong to the 8th rank and didn't have the title of village lord. As a result, among the noble ladies present, Yu Xiang's status was the highest. In addition to her arrogant and domineering reputation, no one dared to provoke her. Yu Xiang was also happy and relaxed. Seeing that the sun was just right today, she took a bag of fish food and went to the back garden to feed the fishes. Several burly women stood guard around her, not allowing anyone to easily approach her. Chang Yafu ordered people to keep an eye on her. Seeing that she didn't move for a long time, she excused herself by saying that she wasn't feeling well and left first. In the front courtyard, Duke Jinghua placed food and wine on the table to apologize to Yu Pinyin. From his croaking to his high position, his words were full of guilt and regret, and he repeatedly urged her to drink. Yu Pinyin usually didn't get drunk even after 1,000 cups. She only drank with a cold face and didn't reply, making Duke Jinghua feel very awkward. He said all the good things he had prepared, but the other party didn't seem to be moved in the slightest. Duke Jinghua's eyes darkened. Right at this moment, Duke Jinghua's wife's personal maidservant ran in and hurriedly said, "Master Ho, it's not good. Miss 3 was feeding the fishes by the pond and somehow fell into the water. Although he has been rescued, he is still unconscious. My family's madam asks you to hurry over and take a look." Yu Pinyin threw down his wine cup with a bang, flicked his sleeves, and left. When he arrived at the side room in the rear courtyard, he saw Duchess Jinghua standing at the door with a panicked expression. He thought that the elder ancestor and the members of the Lin clan were all in the room, so he pushed the door open and entered without thinking. There was no trace of the elder ancestor and the others in the room. There was a lotus fragrance in the air, but it was not as pure as it usually was. A wheelchair was placed beside the bed, and behind the layers of gauze curtains, a slight bulge could be faintly seen. Yu Pinyin's anxious mood instantly calmed down. He slowly walked over and lifted the gauze curtain. He saw Chang Yafu shyly looking at him with the blanket wrapped around him. His brows were filled with boundless shyness. She called out "Yi Feng" in a low voice. Then, she sat up and slowly took off the crimson quilt. Yu Pinyin maintained his posture of lifting the gauze curtain. He raised one eyebrow and stared at her. His pitch-black eyes did not contain the slightest ripple. Chang Yafu was only wearing a crimson dudu and thin, transparent bloomers. Her entire body was suffused with a faint pink from embarrassment. Coupled with her graceful figure and fair skin, she looked as alluring as a demoness at first glance. She crossed her arms and waited, but when she saw that Yu Pinyin was only staring at her without moving, she could only take the initiative to lean over and wrap her arms around his thin waist. Using a coaxing tone, she said, "Feng, I was wrong. I'll give you whatever you want. Can you forgive me just this once? I think about you day and night. My heart is filled with pain and regret. I'm miserable beyond words. Yifeng, I beg you not to abandon me. Otherwise, I'll die. There was no doubt that this was the honey trap that the Chang clan's mother and daughter had thought about for half a month before coming up with. Yu Pinyin was a military commander. What kind of sneaky tricks had he not seen before? Getting him drunk would not work. Drugging him was tantamount to suicide. Only by openly seducing him would there be a bit of hope. He was a hot-blooded young man. He did not have any concubines or tongfang by his side. Normally, he had never flirted with women. He had suppressed his feelings until he was 21 or 22 years old. Suddenly, he saw a perfect woman's body. Moreover, the other party was a woman that he had long been engaged to. Who could resist this kind of temptation? As long as Yu Pinyin was still a man, there was no reason for him not to take action. As long as he took action, he would have no choice but to accept this engagement. However, there was always a gap between imagination and reality. Chang Yafu endured the shame and hugged Yu Pinyin for a long time, but he did not move at all. She could only raise her head to look. However, she saw that Yu Pinyin's long and narrow eyes were filled with ridicule and disdain. The corners of his mouth were raised in an evil smile, as if he was admiring a clown. Her sense of shame soared to the extreme and turned into anger. Chang Yafu decisively untied the belt around her neck and tore off the last piece of cloth covering her private parts. Then, she boldly reached for the man's crotch. She did not believe that Yu Pinyin would be able to hold himself back after she had done this. Yu Pinyin finally moved. However, he did not hug Chang Yafu and roll onto the bed. Instead, he grabbed her wrist and sneered in a low voice, "Chang Yafu, you've really opened this marquis eyes. Don't talk about taking off your clothes to seduce me. Even if you took the initiative to spread your legs and beg for pleasure, this marquis would not want you." Chang Yafu was stunned. For a moment, she did not know how to react. Outside the door, Duchess Jinghua led the matriarch and Yu Xiang over in a hurry. She insisted on letting the family Yu see the sin they had committed with their own eyes. Then, she would grandly hold the two children's wedding. Hearing the sound of footsteps, Yu Pinyin reached out to push Chang Yafu away. Who would have thought that she would suddenly jump on top of him as if she had gone crazy? Her arms tightened around his neck and her legs coiled around his waist. He could not tear her away no matter how hard he tried. The main door opened with a clang. Because it was premeditated, the screen in the room had already been torn off. Everyone's eyes immediately focused on the two entangled people. Duchess Jinghua and her eldest daughter pretended to cry out in surprise. Then, they closed the door behind them, locking everyone inside the room and not letting them out. It was as if they were going to settle accounts at an opportune time. The matriarch was so angry that she couldn't speak. The hand holding the walking stick trembled. The members of the Lin clan and Yu Miaoqi hurriedly stepped forward to support her. They were afraid that she would faint from the shock. Their lowered eyelids concealed the gloating expression in their eyes. This Chang Yafu was also a ruthless person. In order to trap Yu Pinyin, he was willing to use himself as bait. Now that he had seen everything that he should have seen and what he shouldn't have seen, for the sake of both families' reputations, Yu Pinyin had to take responsibility no matter how unwilling he was. Because the servants and biddies had already been dismissed by Duchess Jinghua, Yu Xiang looked towards Yu Miaoqi with an extremely gloomy expression. She ordered, "Push me over." Yu Miaoqi stared blankly, then immediately let go of the matriarch to push her. She wanted to see what exactly she wanted to do. Yu Pinyin was still tearing at Chang Yafu, but Chang Yafu's chest was bare. If she pulled it off, wouldn't everyone see it? In order to preserve her last bit of face, she steeled her heart and refused to come down. As the two struggled, Yu Pinyin's neat clothes were completely disheveled. It really did look like they had a head and a tail. Yu Xiang was pushed to the front of the bed. She raised her horsewhip and lashed out at Chang Yafu's buttocks. She didn't stop even after 5 or 6 lashes. The muffled sounds of leather hitting buttocks reverberated through the air. It was enough to make one's teeth hurt. Chang Yafu couldn't take it anymore. He cried out in pain as he let go of his arms and legs and climbed onto the bed to avoid being whipped. Yu Xiang picked up the thin quilt that had fallen to the ground and threw it at her. Her bright eyes burned with flames of anger. She then pulled her brother behind her and glared at him fiercely. Yu Pinyin gave her a faint smile and unhurriedly straightened her clothes. Duke Jingwa's wife and eldest daughter rushed to the bed to check on Chang Yafu's injuries. When they saw that she was tightly wrapped in a brocade quilt and refused to show her face, they could only turn to look at the matriarch, who had already calmed down, and ask, "The old lady, what do you think we should do about this? Our foal was bullied by Yandere like this. We should at least give an explanation, right?" How could the matriarch not see that this was a trap set up by the mother and daughter pair of the Chang family? However, Yandere really did ruin their reputation. Moreover, the eldest daughter of the Chang family was married to the imperial censor of the left, Jiang Darren. He was also a powerful witness. If she didn't welcome Chang Yafu into the family, she didn't know what kind of trouble the Chang family would stir up. After thinking it over, the matriarch could only grit her teeth and swallow her blood. She nodded and said, "Then let's quickly arrange their wedding." When they heard this, not only did the mother and daughter pair of the Chang family smile, even the mother and daughter pair of the Lin clan revealed happy expressions. Chang Yafu clearly didn't see eye to eye with the matriarch and Yu Xiang. Once she entered the prefecture Yu household, she would be their support. In addition, Yu Pinyin was at the age where he was hot-blooded and vigorous, so he would always treat his first woman a little differently. As such, there was a high chance that they could win him over. Yu Pinyin, who was at the center of everyone's calculations, still had a leisurely expression. He bent over and stared at his younger sister's gloomy face. Yu Xiang pushed away his handsome face that was inching closer and closer. She sneered, "This wedding can't be held. Marriage is decided by the parents and the matchmaker's words. Right now, all the elders are present, and the betrothal gifts and marriage certificates are complete. How can it not be held?" Duke Jingwa's wife's tone was mocking. "Xianger, you should also learn the rules. How can an unmarried woman like you have the right to butt in on this kind of matter?" Yu Xiang used her horsewhip to whip the bedding, her voice sinister. "You're telling me to learn the rules? You have the nerve to say such a thing? What kind of unmarried woman would privately lead a man to her room and openly strip naked for him to see? Is this your Chang family's rule? It's truly an eye-opener." Madame Chang was so angry that she couldn't speak. The eldest daughter, Chang Yiting, didn't know how to refute. Today's matter was indeed a trap they had set up. They had sacrificed Chang Yafu's reputation in order to ensnare Yu Pinyin. Otherwise, who would Chang Yafu marry in this lifetime? Who would dare to marry a woman that the king of hell didn't want? Since her reputation had already been destroyed, it was truly laughable to use the rules to talk about this matter. Yu Xiang whipped the bedding until it split open before coldly saying, "Chang Yafu's conduct has never been good. She even had a relationship with Yu Pinhong before. Now, she even took the initiative to strip and seduce someone. Her behavior is truly too wanton. I suspect that her body is no longer clean. This marriage can't be held. What do you take my older brother for? A turtle son of a bitch who picks up used shoes and wears a green hat." The Chang family's mother and daughter were so angry that smoke came out of their heads. Chang Yafu curled up into a small ball and squeezed into the corner of the bed, as if he had no face to see anyone. Yu Pinyin, on the other hand, laughed quietly. Yu Xiang turned around and fiercely glared at him. The matriarch's gloomy eyes revealed a trace of shrewdness. She nodded in agreement. "Xianger is right. My family, you won't tolerate an unchaste woman entering the family." Chapter 86. The Chang family was using this method to make the Yu family acknowledge the debt. If they really invited the wet nurse to examine Chang Yafu's body, then if she was still a virgin, the Yu family would definitely have to take responsibility for her humiliation. Just as the old madam was hesitating, Yu Xiang sneered. Her beautiful face was full of arrogance. So what if we invite the wet nurse to examine her? If she's not a virgin, our family you won't want her. If she's still a virgin, then it's even worse. Imagine a girl who had yet to be married being able to hover between two men and play them around. When the boat was flipped, she would even throw away her last bit of dignity and take the initiative to take off her clothes and beg for pleasure. She's not even married and she's already such a lewd woman. Won't she stir up a foul atmosphere in my Yu family once she marries into the family? Our family Yu isn't a brothel. We won't accept a slut. You're going too far. Madame Chang choked out after holding back for a long time. Then, she desperately massaged her aching chest. Chang Yafu and Chang Yating were no match for Yu Xiang. They were so embarrassed by her venomous words that they wanted to die. Their eyes turned red. If you dare to do something, then you have to admit it. If you're a slut, then don't even think about building a monument to your chastity. We won't acknowledge this marriage. Yu Xiang continued, you want to stuff a pastry covered in feces into our mouths, and you expect us to swallow it without hesitation? Do you think our family Yu is full of idiots? Chang Yating, you're the wife of the imperial censor of the left, but you don't even know the most basic etiquette. Do you believe that I won't spread the news of Chang Yafu taking off her clothes to seduce men? Then your reputation will be ruined as well. If you want to save face, then hurry up and cancel the marriage. The old madam slowly opened her mouth, that's right. If your Chang family still wants to save face, then come to Prefecture Yu in 7 days to cancel the marriage. Xianger, let's go. Yu Xiang nodded in agreement. Yu Pinyin immediately pushed her out. Unexpectedly, she pinched the back of her hand fiercely, but there was no pain on her face. Instead, she was full of joy. When everyone was gone, Chang Yafu poked his head out of the quilt and burst into tears. Madame Chang and Chang Yating were also on the verge of collapse from Yu Xiang's scolding. If this trick was used on other families, that family would have to admit defeat. However, the family Yu was powerful and shameless. And Chang Yafu's misdeeds. Chang Yafu's misdeeds. If this matter was blown out of proportion, the reputation of the eldest daughter of the first wife who was married off would also be swept to the ground. It was really like lifting a rock and smashing one's own foot. She was the most shameless person in the Yu clan who used her power to bully others. If she hadn't suddenly spoken up, the old lady would have already agreed. The Chang family's mother and daughter immediately hated Yu Xiang to the bone. The matriarch walked out of Prefecture Yu's gate. She rubbed the top of her granddaughter's head and proudly praised, Xianger did well. This family is too shameless. Yu Xiang pursed her lips and nodded. She was still unhappy. When Yu Pinyin carried her into the carriage, she whipped him a few times. He could only hold her arms and beg for mercy in a low voice. The Lin clan's mother and daughter fell into the back carriage. They looked at each other and sighed. Yu Xiang's mouth was really poisonous. She said lewd children, sluts, pastries covered in feces. She almost cursed that family to death on the spot. It really took courage to be her enemy. The Lin clan sighed inwardly. Yu Miaoqi sneered, the Chang family is still a bit shameless. If the other family's womenfolk can also be witnesses, Yu Xiang won't be able to get away with it no matter how eloquent her mouth is. Moreover, Chang Yafu is already engaged to Yu Pinyin. Even if her reputation is damaged, the extent of the damage is limited. When she becomes Madame Yu in the future, who can say that she's fooling around? She lost today because she's not shameless enough. The Lin clan's mother nodded after a moment of silence. Yu Miaoqi suddenly remembered Yu Xiang's evaluation of her, shameless people are invincible. Her expression immediately turned ugly. Yu Pinyin pushed his sister back to the west wing and automatically brought a basin of hot water for her to wash her face. Yu Xiang tested the temperature of the water and was stunned for a moment. She then raised her hand and poured the entire basin of water on him. Seeing this, Lulu hurriedly pulled the panicked Tao Hong out. Yu Pinyin wiped away the water droplets on his face and asked in a low voice, "What's wrong now? You're still so angry even after I coaxed you all the way here. It's obvious that older brother dotes on you too much and spoils you to the point of being undisciplined and out of control." "Yes, I have a bad temper and I'm undisciplined and out of control. I can't compare to your gentlemanly love for the fairer sex. She's already thrown herself into your arms, yet you still refuse to let go, afraid that you'll drop her." Yu Xiang questioned with reddened eyes, "If I didn't stop you, would you have married her today?" Yu Pinyin forcefully suppressed his laughter and pulled her into his arms. Both of them lay down on the couch and used his dripping chin to rub against her fair and delicate neck. He said softly, "Why would I marry her? Aren't I waiting for Xiang'er to come in and save me? In the future, older brother's chastity will depend on Xiang'er to protect it." Yu Xiang was silent for a moment and said in a muffled voice, "You were hugged by her for so long. What chastity do you have left? You're so dirty. Hurry and go wash up." After saying this, she poked her brother's hard chest. Yu Pinyin held her fingertips and buried his face in her cheek. After taking a few deep breaths, he shouted, "Bring a bucket of water in." Tao Hong hurriedly called for someone to bring water. Lulu stood at the door for a long time before she finally entered the room step by step. However, she saw that Master Ho had already gone behind the screen. White mist filled the room and there were a few pieces of dirty clothes on the ground. "Miss, Master Ho is taking a bath here. Do you want to leave for a moment?" She swallowed and asked hesitantly. "Leave for what?" Yu Xiang was deep in thought and didn't even raise her head as she said, "Isn't there a screen there? Where else can I go?" Lulu was speechless for a long time. She stood there blankly for a moment and could only bend down to pick up the clothes on the ground. She was about to take them to wash when she unexpectedly heard her master coldly order, "No need to wash them. Hurry and burn them." "Ah. You just asked the embroiderer to make this set of clothes for Master Ho. He's only wearing it this time." Lulu hesitated. "I told you to burn them. Why are you being so long-winded?" Yu Xiang impatiently glared at her. Lulu had no choice but to roll the clothes into a ball and take it outside to burn. Before she left, she seemed to hear Master Ho's low laughter from behind the screen. After everyone left, Yu Xiang revealed an angry expression. Only the heavens knew that when she saw her brother and Chang Yafu hugging each other without clothes covering their bodies, she couldn't wait to use a rope to hang them upside down and whip them. However, after she poured the warm water on her brother, she began to feel uneasy. Perhaps her emotions were a bit too extreme. Perhaps her actions would make her brother unhappy. After all, he was already 21 or 22 years old. It was understandable for him to fantasize about women. There was a sharp pain in her heart. Yu Xiang's absent-minded eyes slowly darkened, time passed by as her imagination ran wild. Yu Pinyin walked out with his wet hair draped over his shoulders. He saw his little sister's legs covered in a thick cotton cloth. She waved at him. "Brother, come here quickly. I'll help you dry your hair." The two of them had done this countless times. Naturally, they were incomparably familiar with it. Yu Pinyin obeyed and lay on his little sister's legs. The white cotton cloth wrapped around his hair. A small hand would occasionally gently rub through the cloth, and occasionally insert into his hair and slowly stroke it. A warm and pleasant feeling quietly crept into his heart. Yu Xiang's face had long since lost its previous anger. Instead, it was filled with a sweet smile. She whispered, "Brother, I didn't deliberately throw a tantrum at you today. I was truly shocked by the shamelessness of the Chang family's mother and daughter. Fortunately, although they're shameless, they're not shameless enough. Otherwise, if they called all the women who came to the banquet as witnesses, you wouldn't be able to clear your name even if you had 100 mouths. Could it be that you're really willing to marry that indecent woman, Chang Yafu?" Her sweet voice unconsciously carried a trace of resentment. Yu Pinyin closed his eyes slightly and smiled. How could that be? Even if they're thick-skinned enough, brother still has a way to make them voluntarily break off the engagement. "Xiang'er, don't worry. Brother will marry anyone but Chang Yafu." As he spoke, he grabbed his little sister's small hand that was stroking his hair and gently squeezed it. Yu Xiang inwardly sighed in relief and smiled. That's good. A real man doesn't have to worry about not having a wife. Without Chang Yafu, we can slowly look for someone. It's best to find someone who will be devoted to brother. Yu Pinyin raised his eyes and glanced at her. He casually said, "Devoted? Any random person in the capital can be devoted to me. Which woman doesn't regard her husband as her everything after marriage?" These words sounded as if he was extremely anxious about marrying a wife. Yu Xiang's sensitive nerves were pricked. She forcefully grabbed her brother's hair with one hand and wrapped her other hand around his neck, tightening her grip. She lowered her small face and pressed the tip of her nose against her brother's as she sneered, "Any random person? Can you find a wife so casually? If you're really anxious, I'll have the old ancestor marry 8 or 10 women into the family tomorrow. I'll have them hover around you all day and fight over you like a piece of juicy meat. They'll drug this one and poison that one. In order to give birth to a little heir as soon as possible, they'll hastily burrow into your bedding and squeeze you dry. They'll even stuff bugs into your nostrils." As she spoke, she released the strands of hair in her hand and pulled her brother's face instead. She bared her small white teeth and threatened him. Yu Pinyin was breathless from being strangled by her, but he couldn't stop chuckling. He begged for mercy. "Xiang'er, hurry and let go. Brother is just joking with you. Without your consent, brother won't marry anyone." "Really?" Yu Xiang poked his high nose with the tip of her finger. "Of course it's true. What 8 or 10? Brother already has trouble dealing with one of you. How would I have the heart to deal with 8 or 10? Good Xiang'er, hurry and let go of brother." Yu Pinyin didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he tried to pry his sister's arm away. Yu Xiang stared at him for a while before letting go of his neck. She broke into a smile. "That's a good boy. We're not in a hurry to get married. Let's take our time to find a wife. It would be best if they could find a wife for 8 or 10 years. As she thought of this, Yu Xiang's large eyes narrowed. She smiled slyly and pouted her lips as she forcefully kissed her brother's forehead. Yu Pinyin's breathing stopped slightly. He tapped his left cheek and coaxed, "Here too." With a crisp smack, he tapped his right cheek again. Yu Xiang giggled. After generously kissing his cheek, she kissed his eyes, then the bridge of his nose, his chin, and the corner of his mouth. She didn't stop until his entire face was wet with kisses. Yu Pinyin's chest heaved. He couldn't suppress the tenderness in his heart. He wrapped his arms around her neck and pulled her into his embrace. He carefully rubbed and caressed her and kissed her intensely. Lu stood guard at the door of the room. His face was deathly pale and his forehead was dark. He glanced at Tao Hong who was leisurely eating melon seeds and asked in a low voice, "Don't you think that Miss and Master Ho are too close? If Miss isn't close to Master Ho, would she be close to you?" Tao Hong spat out a melon seed shell. After a moment of silence, Lu said, "But she can't always rely on Master Ho. If she's not relying on Master Ho, then should she rely on you?" Lu facepalmed. "That's not what I meant. What I meant was, how can Master Ho hug Miss all day? If Master Ho doesn't hug her, then should those old women who are like mud balls hug her? Aya, it hurts my eyes. Tao Hong hurriedly covered his eyes with his hands as if he was disgusted by the scene. Chapter 87. The Chung family suffered a loss and automatically came to cancel the engagement 3 days later. They also returned the gifts they had given during the engagement. Their attitude could be considered sincere. The matriarch gladly accepted them and told them not to mention the past again. When the mother and daughter of the Chung family saw that the prefecture had no intention of making things difficult for them, the large stone hanging in their hearts finally fell to the ground. After another half a month, the matriarch heard that the Purple Direction Pavilion had received a new batch of exotic seafood. Among them was a kind of bright mirror that could reflect a person's figure down to the tiniest detail. She guessed that her granddaughter, who loved beauty, would definitely like it, so she had her granddaughter accompany her to choose. Yu Xiang knew that it was a mercury mirror and readily agreed. When she left the courtyard, she saw that the mother and daughter of the Lin clan were also following closely behind her. Her good mood instantly dropped by half. The group arrived at the Purple Direction Pavilion in 2 separate carriages. The womenfolk of each family who had also received the news also hurried over. The carriages were packed to the brim and parked in a row. Although the family Yu was only a second-rank noble, Yu Pinyin was one of the most influential people in the capital. The shopkeeper didn't dare to be negligent and sent several shop assistants to entertain them. Western taffeta, lace cloth, clocks, music boxes, mercury mirrors, and other items were placed in the most conspicuous places in the shop. Anyone who came would rush over to take a look and touch them. Yu Xiang saw that there were many people there, so she asked Tao Hong to push her behind a few antique shelves to choose some exquisite small items. A colorful opal necklace attracted her attention. Just as she was about to reach out to take it, someone grabbed it first. Yu Xiang glared angrily and immediately exclaimed, "Your Highness the Crown Prince." The Crown Prince's eyes were full of smiles as he gestured for her to keep quiet. Yu Xiang immediately covered her gaping mouth with her small hand. "You like this necklace?" the Crown Prince asked in a low voice. Yu Xiang nodded honestly. "If that's the case, I'll give it to you. What else do you want?" "I'll pay for it." The Crown Prince waved his sleeve generously. Yu Xiang didn't know how to write the word courteous at all. His fingertips tapped repeatedly, "Thank you, Your Highness. I want this string of beads, this dressing box, this tortoiseshell comb, this." In one breath, he picked 7 or 8 things and ordered Tao Hong, Lu, to hold them in his arms. The Crown Prince liked her straightforwardness and asked her several times if she wanted more. It's hard to refuse such kindness. "Then let's add another mercury mirror." She fiercely smashed the rotten egg in her hand on Yu Xiang's face and cursed, "Prefecture Yu's bastard, go to hell." Yu Pinyin is a heartless and ambitious official. He actually wants to cover the sky with one hand in the capital. Not only does he indiscriminately kill the innocent, but he also harms the loyal. Sooner or later, he will suffer retribution. Today, I will enforce justice on behalf of the heavens and perish together with a vile spawn like you. As she shouted, she stretched out her hands and pretended to strangle Yu Xiang. Her eyes had already turned blood red. It was obvious that she had already entered a demonic state. Wherever she passed, people would retreat and scream in fear. However, Yu Xiang didn't show the slightest fear. She used a handkerchief to wipe the egg on her cheeks and waved her hand, "Catch this crazy woman for me." Prefecture Yu's maidservants were different from other residences. They more or less knew how to fight. At this time, they swarmed forward and restrained the woman in a few breaths. The woman frantically struggled and cursed loudly, attracting everyone's attention. Behind the ancient bookshelf, Yu Miaoqi saw that the crown prince didn't ask about her origins. She was secretly anxious. When she heard the commotion, she tiptoed to take a look. She immediately came up with an idea and pretended to anxiously bid farewell to the crown prince. "Young master, my younger sister seems to have encountered some trouble. This little girl needs to go and help, so I'll leave first." These words first hinted at her identity, then used Yu Xiang's difficult situation to set off her elegance. If she could smoothly resolve this matter, she could also show off her ability. It could be said that she was killing two birds with one stone. Her footsteps were disorderly and her breathing was rapid. It was as if she was very worried about Yu Xiang's safety. When the crown prince saw that Yu Xiang was being blamed, he immediately followed her out. However, he didn't go forward to help. Instead, he clasped his hands behind his back and watched. He knew exactly how capable Yu Xiang was. A mere crazy woman couldn't do anything to her. Moreover, he also knew that woman. She was Su Fei's sister-in-law. Just as the crown prince predicted, the leeches in the nostrils of the crown princess and the children were put there by Su Fei. Her goal was to make her son the legitimate son. Because the Su family had been relying on military power for the past few years and the Empress Dowager wanted to control the court, Emperor Qing Kong couldn't bear it anymore. He used this matter to severely punish the Su family. As the commander of the 9 gates, Su Mao was executed by Yu Pinyin. Because the Empress Dowager begged for mercy, the Su family's womenfolk were spared from death. However, their family property was confiscated and their lives were difficult. In the 11th year Qing Kong was promoted to the position of Xian Wei Shi. He embezzled several 100,000 taels of soldiers' pay and provisions, resulting in the Yangtze River's 6 paths soldiers having no money to spend the winter in silver and cotton clothes. More than 10,000 people died from the cold. In the 17th year, Qing Kong was promoted to wing leader of the Jianrui battalion. He secretly released the prisoners on death row from the imperial prison and led them into the jungle to hunt them down like animals. Qing Kong was promoted to the commander of the 9 gates in 21 years. He received more than 1 million in bribes and assassinated dozens of people in order to eliminate dissidents. His misdeeds were too numerous to be recorded. You have the nerve to use the word loyal to describe a beast like him? Yu Xiang waved her hand at Lu, buy a basket of eggs and bring it over. Under everyone's baffled expressions, she continued, the emperor killed him because he was guilty and deserved it. Older brother personally killed him to get rid of an evil for the people. If you feel that you have been wronged, you can go beat the drum and report to the emperor. Why do you have to make things difficult for a cripple like me? My older brother indeed kills people like flies, but he has never killed an innocent person, nor has he ever framed a loyal person. He spilled his blood on the battlefield for his country, and he was loyal to the emperor until his death. I, Yu Xiang, am here to say that if anyone thinks that my brother is guilty of a wrongful case, you can take an egg and smash it on my head, smash it as hard as you can. I will sit here and wait for you all. Her every word was as heavy as 1,000 caddies. She didn't seem to be short of breath or weak at all. When everyone present was swept by her cold gaze, they all lowered their heads and kept silent, their eyes filled with fear. Only then did the matriarch squeeze out of the crowd with difficulty and coldly say, Xiang'er is right. If anyone feels that they have been wronged, then my family you will bear with it. Someone, come and take a seat. Mama Ma quickly brought over a chair for the matriarch to sit down. Lulu also quickly bought a basket of eggs and placed it in front of everyone. Inside and outside the store, it was so quiet that you could hear a pin drop. Not only Madame Zhou, but even the passers-by who were watching the show had turned pale. Yu Xiang had already spoken to this point, so who would dare to smash it? Yu Pinyin had been ordered to kill people. If the emperor said that this person was guilty, who would dare to say no? Even if they hated Yu Pinyin to the bone, who would dare to stand up and smash an egg today? Smashing it meant that they had a grudge against the emperor and were dissatisfied with the court. When they returned, there would be plenty of people to deal with them. Yupinyan's face did not show it, but his thumb was placed on the hilt and forcefully rubbed it, barely suppressing the surging emotions in his heart. That was his younger sister, his sweetheart. No matter how others criticized her, she would always treat him wholeheartedly. He did not know how to repay this true love. He only felt that no matter how much he spoiled her, no matter how much he loved her, he felt that it was not enough. Standing behind Emperor Qingkong, Shen Yuanqi hung his head and smiled bitterly. The sour feeling in his heart was simply indescribable. His younger sister, who was once pampered and spoiled, spread rumors everywhere to ruin his career, while his younger sister, who was related by blood, did not even know of his existence. Of the two, one was treacherous, cruel, and unscrupulous, while the other was pure and natural, loyal and righteous. Could it be that the family Shen did not raise Yumiaoqi to be the way he was today? Thinking of this, his heart felt even more uncomfortable. Emperor Qingkong clapped his hands and applauded Yuxiang as soon as he finished speaking. His deep laughter attracted everyone's attention. At the same time, many dragon-scale guards suddenly appeared inside and outside the shop, guarding the purple direction pavilion tightly. Emperor! The old lady jumped up in shock and was about to salute with her walking stick. This place is inconvenient, old madam does not need to be so courteous. Emperor Qingkong waved his sleeves and waved his hand. Most of the people who could afford to patronize the Purple Direction Pavilion were the most influential families in the capital. Although most of them were women, there were still quite a few people who recognized Emperor Qingkongdi. They were about to follow suit and bow, but upon hearing these words, they immediately stopped and stood in place, not knowing what to do. The ladies were even more confused and at a loss for what to do. On the contrary, Yuxiang casually used her sleeve to wipe off the egg on her chin and the eggshell on her skirt. She gracefully cupped her hands and bowed. Yuxiang greets Master Huang. Master Huang, are you also here to buy a mercury mirror? Emperor Qingkong smiled brightly and strode forward. He disdainfully flicked off the remaining eggshell on her head and said warmly, "That's right. I ordered 2 for little Jiu, and my first wife. Does Xiang like them? If you like them, Master will also buy 1 for you. Young Master Huang has already bought 1 for me. Many thanks, Master Huang." Yuxiang giggled and cupped her hands, her attitude intimate and natural. Emperor Qingkong laughed brightly again and pointed at taffeta, lace, and other things, asking if she wanted them. If she wanted them, she could take them all. Yuxiang quickly said, "I don't dare to refuse an elder's gift." She accepted them without any trace of politeness, causing the crown prince to laugh again and again. Chapter 89. After dealing with Zhoushe, Emperor Qingkong pointed at the hiding Yumiaoqi and asked, "Old madam, your granddaughter is Liao Kong Shirtai's secular disciple, the second young lady who just returned home?" Liao Kong Shirtai's secular disciple. When did this happen? The matriarch didn't care about worldly affairs for many years and didn't interact with the other families. She actually didn't know anything about the rumors spread by the Lin clan mother and daughter. Now that the emperor personally asked about it and knew about Yumiaoqi's origins, there was no need to mention the awkwardness. If this matter was small, it was Yumiaoqi's vanity and nonsense. If it was big, it was deceiving the monarch. The matriarch broke out in a cold sweat. Yumiaoqi only smiled faintly and bowed as she replied, reporting to Huang Lei, Miaoqi only stayed with Liao Kong Shirtai for a few days and listened to some teachings. I can't be considered a secular disciple. At the time, she didn't explicitly say that she was Liao Kong Shirtai's secular disciple. She only hinted a few words. The other rumors were all the conjectures of those noblewomen. What she said now was the truth, but in other people's ears, it sounded modest. In the end, Liao Kong Shirtai was the emperor's younger sister. In the future, when the brother and sister talked about this matter, she would have a topic to talk about and wouldn't be suspected of deceiving the monarch. Emperor Chen Kang's gaze was slightly cold. Even the usually gentle crown prince furrowed his brows. He thought to himself that this woman was indeed scheming and had a bad nature. Yu Miaoqi saw the change in the two people's emotions and couldn't help but feel apprehensive. Just as she was pondering what she had said wrong, she heard Emperor Chen Kong say in a heavy voice, "Old madam, your granddaughter grew up outside in the end. In terms of bearing, she can't compare to Xiang'er. She still needs to be taught properly. Huang Leoi is right. I've already asked 2 mamas to teach her, but she still lacks some intelligence and doesn't understand." The matriarch sighed deeply, not caring about Yu Miaoqi's face at all. When the noblewomen heard this, they all shook their heads in their hearts. This woman was just as the emperor had said, too petty. Although she had Kong Shirtai's guidance, she had been living in seclusion deep in the mountains and forests for a long time. She was still lacking in knowledge and experience. She could be considered as a wife, but she was not fit to be a woman of an aristocratic family. If she had been the one who was hit today, she would have been plotted against by Madame Zhou, and Yu Pinyin would have to bear the crime of silencing a witness. It would also implicate the people present. She was really an unpresentable person. Yu Miaoqi's face was deathly pale and her eyes were red. She hid behind the Lin clan and trembled slightly. Today, she had lost to Yu Xiang, and it was a crushing defeat. With the emperor's evaluation, her path to marrying into the crown prince mansion was completely cut off. Lin clan quietly held her cold hand to comfort her. How could he not feel shame and resentment in his heart? While they were talking, Shen Yuanqi quietly moved to Yu Xiang's side and handed over a clean handkerchief. Although Yu Xiang had met him twice and had a very good impression of him, she was not close enough to accept his personal belongings. She slightly shook her head and refused. Just at this time, Yu Pinyin asked for a wet handkerchief from the shopkeeper. As soon as Yu Xiang saw her older brother, she threw herself into his arms and rubbed her head full of egg juice on his clothes. She squinted her bright cat eyes and smiled wickedly. Yu Pinyin's expression was helpless, but his eyes were full of deep affection. He carefully cleaned her up little by little and lovingly pinched the tip of her nose. Shen Yuanqi secretly smiled bitterly. He put the handkerchief into his sleeve and retreated to the side. Since Emperor Chen Kang's whereabouts had been exposed, it was naturally inconvenient for him to stay outside the palace. He ordered the palace servants to pack up the mercury mirror and other items and quickly leave. He was worried that the matriarch would be frightened, so he ordered Yu Pinyin to stay behind and comfort her. After the shopkeeper sent this great deity away, he turned around and looked at Yu Xiang's hair that was covered in egg white. He cautiously said, "Domain chief, if Miss 3 doesn't mind, you can go to the inner room to clean your hair a little." Allowing that crazy woman to break into the store and commit such a violent act was due to this one's negligence. "Domain chief, please forgive this one. That crazy woman is unreasonable. What does it have to do with you? Forget it." Yu Xiang generously waved her hand, but quickly added, "If you really want to apologize, give me a 30% discount when I buy things from your store in the future." How could the shopkeeper dare to say no? He immediately agreed and then ordered someone to prepare hot water. Yu Pinyin pushed his younger sister into the inner room. Before he left, he coldly glanced at Shen Yuanqi. Shen Yuanqi knew that he was angry at him for getting close to Xiang'er. He couldn't help but smile bitterly in his heart. He inwardly sighed that Commandant Yu really loved his younger sister as much as his life, just like the rumors said. But in reality, that was also his younger sister. It was just that Prefecture Yu had taken her away by accident. To take away such a lovely younger sister and leave behind a fiend like Yu Miaoqi, it should be family Yu who owed family Shen. While he was inwardly cursing, Yu Miaoqi quickly broke free from his embarrassing mood. He saw that all the customers in the store had been scared away and that the matriarch was sitting on an armchair with her eyes closed. How could Yu Xiang not understand the meaning behind his words? He quickly shook his head and said, Jiao Jiao's mother is celebrating her birthday, and she invited me to a banquet. Brother, don't worry. I'll only stay in the inner courtyard and won't go anywhere. I won't see any other men. As she explained, she covered her face, afraid that her brother would remove the foundation she had just put on. Only then did Yu Pinyin take over the brush. He carefully painted her light but stylish eyebrows. After he finished painting, he pinched her chin and looked at her for a moment. Then, he leaned over and looked at the mercury mirror with her. Two similar faces were reflected in the mirror. One was bright and beautiful, and the other was handsome beyond compare. Yu Xiang was stunned. She held her chin and sighed, Brother, we look so alike. Could this be the legendary husband and wife look-alike? Yu Pinyin was obviously pleased by her. He chuckled and kissed her forehead. His mouth was filled with the fragrance of lotus flowers. Then, he dipped it in a little rouge and gently smeared it on her cheeks. His movements were skillful and his drawing was exquisite. It was obvious that this wasn't the first time he had dressed his sister up. After applying the blush, he picked a light pink lipstick and slowly applied it to his sister's soft lips. There was still a little lipstick left on his fingertips. He was about to use a handkerchief to wipe it off, but Yu Xiang took it into her mouth first. She used her little tongue to suck away the sweet lipstick mixed with peach blossom petals and beeswax. She narrowed her eyes and savored the taste. A wisp of flame flowed from his fingertips to his lower abdomen. Yu Pinyin's dark eyes shot out an ominous glint, but he quickly restrained it. His Adam's apple bobbed up and down. If not for the fact that she hadn't made it clear, he would have eaten the little girl alive. Lulu covered her face and turned away. She couldn't bear to watch. She couldn't blame Master Ho for being tempted. She could only blame her master for being too seductive. After Yu Xiang finished her lipstick, she giggled and opened her makeup box. She said heartlessly, Brother, help me pick a flower. Yu Pinyin licked away the saliva left on his sister's fingertips. Then, he bent over to pick a flower. It took Yu Xiang a full 2 hours to dress up. When she arrived at the door, she discovered that the Lin clan and Yu Miaoqi were waiting in front of the carriage. The Lin clan had originally planned to hold a grand banquet to introduce their daughter to the various mistresses and young ladies. However, the matriarch had vetoed the idea. In order for her daughter to gain a foothold in the capital, she had no choice but to shamelessly cling on to Yu Xiang. Without social interaction, her daughter's paths were cut off. There was nothing she could do. Yu Xiang didn't say anything. She simply refused to sit in the same carriage as Yu Miaoqi no matter what. The group took 2 carriages to Fan Manor. The Lin clan went to reminisce with Lady Fan. Yu Miaoqi and Yu Xiang were led to the back garden by a servant to play with the noble ladies attending the banquet. When they saw Yu Xiang, the noble ladies parted like a tide to let her pass. Their faces were filled with fear, dread, and vigilance. Fan Jiaojiao had long been fed up with people trying to cling on to her. When she saw her good friend, she hurriedly went forward to greet her. I heard that you were pelted with rotten eggs. This person also had a loose tongue. That's right. My head was full of egg yolk and egg white. Disgusting. Yu Xiang stroked her hair. Madame Zhou is still locked up in prison. The emperor has withdrawn his imperial decree and exiled her family of 13. They will be leaving the capital in a few days. My brother's subordinates are in charge of this escort. Do you want me to help you take care of them? Jiao Jiao knows me best. Yu Xiang hugged her good friend's thick waist and shook it. Fan Jiaojiao's face was black and red. She gave a forthright laugh. Because the two of them had a terrible reputation, few noble ladies dared to approach them. Other than Yu Miaoqi, no one else heard her words. It was already hard enough for the entire family to be exiled. If the soldiers made things difficult for them on the road, she didn't know if they would be able to reach the place of exile alive. With this thought, Yu Miaoqi had a deeper understanding of Yu Xiang's viciousness. She couldn't help but admit that the more she understood Yu Xiang, the more afraid she felt. However, she and Yu Xiang were natural enemies. No matter how afraid she was, she still wanted to kill her. Only when she died could she live a peaceful life. While thinking, she looked around and saw Chang Yafu, who was surrounded by several noble ladies. Her eyes flashed slightly. Fan Jiaojiao also saw Chang Yafu. She pointed out, "Look, Chang Yafu also came. I heard that on the day she was removed from service, the two of you had a quarrel. She was scolded by you to the point that she almost committed suicide. That was why she took the initiative to annul the engagement with your brother. Xianger, you really are invincible in the capital when it comes to scolding people." As she spoke, she gave 2 thumbs up to show her admiration. Committing suicide after being scolded by someone. If this happened to someone else, it might seem strange, but no one would doubt it when it happened to Yu Xiang. There were many noble ladies in the capital who had been scolded by her to the point of crying. There were also many who had been scolded by her to the point of not daring to show their faces. There were even some who were too lazy to open their mouths and raise their hands to whip them. She had only made 2 good friends since she was 14 years old. Chapter 91. Yu Xiang's temper wasn't good to begin with. Chang Yafu's plotting against Yu Pinyin had already touched her bottom line. After the incident, he even used her as a stepping stone to clear his name by smearing her name. He was truly despicable and shameless. Yu Xiang had never been one to swallow the humiliation of being plotted against. Her principle was, if you respect me, I'll respect you tenfold. If you step on me, I'll stomp you to death. She shouted at the group of people who were walking away, Chang Yafu, if you had obediently annulled the engagement, the matter between us would have been settled. Now that you insist on making things difficult for me, you can't blame me for being ruthless. Chang Yafu's figure swayed and he almost fell. Fortunately, the people next to him supported him. One of them angrily turned around and roared in a low voice, "Yu Xiang, that's enough. Don't push me too far. Don't push me too far. Your relationship is quite good. Birds of a feather flock together. I'll kindly give you a piece of advice, stay away from her. Be careful of ruining your reputation." After Yu Xiang finished shouting, she pointed at Yu Miaoqi, who was hidden in the corridor. "You too. You clearly know what kind of person she is, yet you still went up to comfort her. What are you trying to do? Could it be that you think her actions are worthy of emulating? You've been cultivating in Shuiyuan nunnery for 14 years. Where did your cultivation go? You don't even know what shame is." Chang Yafu had already run towards the side hall. When he found Duke Jinggua's wife, he hid behind her and trembled. Yu Miaoqi lowered her head and didn't say a word. However, she had a bad feeling in her heart. Fan Jiaojiao looked simple and honest, but she wasn't stupid at all. She asked curiously, "What do you mean by ruining her reputation?" "Shame. Could it be that there's some inside story here? Weren't you the one who scolded Chang Yafu and annulled the engagement?" Yu Xiang raised her index finger to her petal-like lips. "Shoo, don't ask too much right now. You'll know soon enough." Yu Miaoqi was frightened. She quickly stepped forward and said in a low voice, "Yu Xiang, you can't be like this. Isn't it enough that Sister Full took the initiative to break off the engagement? She was already in her early 20s this year. If she didn't find a better reason to smooth things over, how could she get married in the future? Can't you empathize with her? Yu Xiang raised an eyebrow and sneered, if you were the one whose reputation was ruined, wouldn't you be considerate? Are you trying to smear my reputation because I don't have a good reputation? Do you think I'm a living bodhisattva who will allow you to shit on my head? Since you helped her today, you should be prepared to be slapped in the face by me. Get lost, I don't want to talk to you. The three of them walked to the intersection and were about to part ways when they heard Yu Xiang's gentle voice call out, "Older sister, do you want to come play in my courtyard?" Yu Miaoqi hesitated. What? Are you afraid of me? Yu Xiang raised one of her eyebrows. Her originally gorgeous face carried an air of arrogance. For some reason, Yu Miaoqi felt that she was a head shorter than her and immediately smiled, how could I be? Then let's go. The Lin clan tugged on her sleeve and shook her head slightly. Older sister, how old are you? You don't even know how to walk after leaving your mother. I'm not a tiger, do you think I'll eat you? Yu Xiang covered her mouth and chuckled. Yu Miaoqi pushed the Lin clan aside and followed behind her with the two maidservants. As soon as the group walked into the small courtyard that resembled a peach blossom garden, Yu Xiang had someone close the courtyard door. She pulled Yu Miaoqi's belt and pulled her to kneel on the ground. With one hand holding her arms behind her back and the other pinching a thin layer of skin on her face, Yu Xiang smiled eerily. The two maidservants turned pale with fright. Just as they were about to step forward to help, Tao Hong and Lu Lu kicked them over and pressed them to the ground, unable to move. Yu Xiang, what are you trying to do? Yu Miaoqi was indescribably horrified. When she questioned her, her voice was sharp and cracked. What am I trying to do? You should be the one trying to do it. Today, you took the initiative to comfort Chang Yafu just to confirm the rumor that I bullied her, right? With such a powerful sister-in-law, which daughter would dare to marry into the Marquis family? Right now, the old ancestor hasn't woken up yet. Once she figures it out, she'll definitely send me out to make room for the new sister-in-law. Can't you see me living well? When did I ever provoke you? The fingers pinching her face tightened, causing Yu Miaoqi to gasp in pain. However, she couldn't voice out her hatred and could only glare at her with red eyes. Yu Xiang sneered, Yu Miaoqi, if you don't provoke me, I won't provoke you either. If you insist on going against me, I can't help but tear off your face. As she spoke, she fiercely pulled at the skin on her fingertips. Please don't pinch me anymore. I was wrong. I was jealous that you were doted on by the old ancestor and big brother. That's why I always went against you. I won't dare to do it again in the future. Please let go of me. If you let me go, I'll definitely behave myself in the future. When I see you, I'll automatically take a detour. Is that okay? Is that okay? A sharp pain told Yu Miaoqi that her cheek had been pinched by Yu Xiang. If she didn't apply medicine in time, it might leave a scar. If that was the case, what else could she do in this life? This person wasn't some noble young lady. She was fiercer than a bandit and more evil than an evil spirit. If she was provoked, she could do all sorts of crazy things. Yu Miaoqi was really scared this time. She sobbed bitterly. Her tears soaked into the wound and brought an even sharper pain. She was so scared that she was out of her wits and lost her composure. Looking at this battered and exhausted face, Yu Xiang finally felt better. She let go of her arm and face and pushed her away. Then she took out a handkerchief and slowly wiped her fingertips. She softly said, "That's right. After all, we're sisters from the same mother. Why make things difficult for each other? If you're obedient, I definitely won't touch you." All right, all right. Why are you crying? How big of a deal is it? She threw away the handkerchief and waved at Tao Hong, who was sitting on Bao Xing's back. Go. Bring me the amethyst bruise dissolving ointment from my dowry. Tao Hong complied and kicked Bao Xing before running into the room. Bao Xing hurriedly got up to help her master. She sobbed, "Third, Miss 3, you're too much. Look at how you pinched our Miss face. If Master Ho and the old lady ask." Yu Xiang carelessly interrupted her. "That's enough. There's no need for brother or the old lady to ask. If you feel wronged, you can go and complain to them. Go, go. Take the medicine." Tao Hong hurriedly ran out and stuffed the medicine bottle into Bao Xing's hand. Chapter 92. Yu Xiang promised the matriarch that she would be patient for the time being, and she did so for 4 or 5 days. During this time, Yu Miaoqi stayed in her room to recuperate and didn't dare to go out. When the Lin clan saw the 4 bloody fingernail marks on her face, they rushed to the southern courtyard to settle the score with Yu Xiang. Coincidentally, they met Yu Pinyin, who was at the yamen. They were full of blame, but they didn't dare to vent and could only leave dejectedly. Because Yu Xiang had offended too many noble ladies, Chang Yafu benefited from this misfortune and caught their attention. He was invited to parties for several days in a row and made many friends. Madame Chang didn't stay idle either. She went around looking for suitors for her daughter and finally chose the second legitimate son of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Lord Qi, as her son-in-law. Although he wasn't as powerful as Yu Pinyin, his appearance and character were passable. However, his fiancée was also in mourning. After the mourning period, she unexpectedly died of an illness just as they were preparing for the marriage. This allowed the Chang clan to take advantage of the situation. Chang Yafu was on tenterhooks for several days, but when he saw that Yu Xiang didn't make a move, his anxious mood gradually calmed down. That's right, Yu Xiang's reputation was so bad that it was only natural to slander her. No matter how she tried to defend herself, others would just think that she was taking revenge for personal reasons. Who would believe her? Evil deeds are doomed to destruction. This time, even if she had 100 mouths, she wouldn't be able to clear her name. If Yu Pinyin still wanted to marry in this life, he would have to send her out of the door as soon as possible. She was a cripple with a broken leg and such an explosive temper. Apart from those despicable people who wanted to cling on to the Marquis household, who would dare to marry her? If she married such a person, she would be able to have a few days of stability in the beginning. Once the other party gained power, wouldn't he torture Yu Xiang to death? Just thinking about it made her extremely happy. Sitting in the rickety carriage, Chang Yafu couldn't help but chuckle softly. You've changed the engagement letter and issued the marriage certificate. Are you happy now? Madame Chang teased as she hugged her daughter. That's right. Finally, there's a silver lining. Chang Yafu heaved a sigh of relief. It's all thanks to Yu Xiang's bad reputation. Otherwise, I really don't know how to smooth things over. Mrs. Chang stroked her daughter's hair and sneered. Family Yu only cares about spoiling her. They will regret it when the Yu Pinyin can't get a wife in the future. Exactly. Yu Pinyin is already 21 or 22 this year, and he doesn't have anyone to warm his bed. Let's see how long he can endure. He has to make a choice between his woman and his sister, right? If the miss is accidentally hurt, we'll all be killed by Master Ho. Lulu pinched her arm hard. The old woman turned pale with fright and carried her shoulder pole to the dragon scale guard station. At the same time, Tao Hong had already smashed 5 or 6 vases and a copper furnace. The Duke of Jinggua's mansion's front door was full of holes and paint was falling off. It wasn't good for the Duke of Jinggua to tangle with a little girl who had a broken leg. He could only hide behind the door and listen to the sounds, hoping that they would quickly leave after smashing the vases. Several boxes of porcelain had been smashed and there was no place to stand in front of the Duke of Jinggua's mansion's front door. Yu Xiang used a handkerchief to cover her face to avoid being scratched by the shards. When she saw Tao Hong shake his head at her, she shouted loudly, "Chang Yafu, listen to me carefully. You're the one who's disorderly and unrestrained, so don't blame me for breaking off the engagement. What's wrong with you? Stripping and shaking your butt at the slightest provocation. What's wrong with you? The red mole on your left breast is about to blind me. Today, I didn't expose you because I was being polite. You should know when to stop. Don't think of using me as a stepping stone. I'll smash all of the gifts you return to avoid dirtying my, Marquis Yongla's, place." After she finished speaking, she waved her sleeves at the servants, "Let's go." Everyone lifted up the empty mahogany boxes and turned around in a grandiose manner. Before boarding the carriage, Yu Xiang suddenly turned around and added, "Chang Yafu, from now on, wear more clothes when you go out. For better or for worse, it'll cover up your coquettish aura. If you hang yourself, it won't be me who scolded you, it'll be you who won't have the face to see anyone." Alright, with just a few words, she scolded him to the point that he wished he could die. With just a few words, she blocked his path to death. If Chang Yafu really did hang herself, then she wouldn't have any face and would thoroughly confirm Yu Xiang's scolding today. The onlookers immediately burst into an uproar. Duke Jinghua, who was hiding behind the door, almost fainted from anger. Not to mention the Chang family's mother and daughter, who just happened to rush back. They hugged each other and cried bitterly in a nearby carriage. No matter what, they couldn't understand how Yu Xiang could do something like scolding someone on the street. Which family's young miss would have the guts to do this? If she scolded to her heart's content, what good would it do her? Her fierce reputation could no longer be salvaged. What was reputation worth? Could it be eaten? Yu Xiang curled her lips. She only felt unprecedentedly comfortable. Just as everyone was moving the boxes onto the carriage, Duke Jinggua's front door suddenly opened. Chang Qi rushed out with a treasured sword raised. "Ancestor, this is the guest list for my coming-of-age ceremony. Please take a look at it for me, s. Uses. Isn't it inappropriate for the 9th princess and Jiao Jiao to be your deacons? At that time, they will have to kneel for 2 hours. I'm afraid they won't be able to take it." The Lin clan went over to take a look, and they were out of breath. The guest of honor was the crown princess, and the host was Lady Fan. The host was the crown princess's mother, Madame Min. The attendants were the 9th princess and Fan Jiaojiao. The host was the old lady's sister-in-law, Madame Wu. I didn't ask them to come. They insisted on becoming deacons. Isn't it just for fun? My legs are inconvenient, so I might as well simplify the process so that I don't have to trouble myself and everyone else. Yu Xiang flicked the paper. The old lady smiled and nodded. "Okay, let me take a look at the list. I'll help you decide." The old lady was about to take the list, but Yu Miaoqi took it first. She smiled gently. "I've been in charge of the household for half a year. Logically speaking, I should be responsible for this. I didn't expect you to have already prepared it. I'm ashamed. Grandmother doesn't have enough energy. If you have any requests, just tell me. I'll take care of them for you. After all, this is our s. Don't worry. I'll do my best." She'd heard of freeloading, but she'd never heard of freeloading. Yu Xiang glanced at her and chuckled. "I'll say it again. A shameless person is invincible. Yu Miaoqi, I'll give it to you. Okay, if you mess up my zazas, I'll skin you alive." Her tone was light and flirtatious. She even teased Yu Miaoqi by twisting the skin on the back of her hand. Yu Miaoqi smiled at her, but there was a trace of malice in her eyes. The old lady pretended that she was blind and couldn't see the undercurrent between the two. She waved her hand and said, "Forget it. If you want to do it well. This is a once-in-a-lifetime SSSSSSSSSS. If you mess it up, the one to suffer will be no one else. She understands." Yu Miaoqi hurriedly knelt down and promised. She was relieved. If she invited the crown princess to be her guest of honor, no one would dare to look down on her in the future. After 3 days of bathing and fasting, Yu Xiang woke up early for the first time on the day of hers. It was the end of October, and the cool autumn wind was chilly. The servants had already changed into their cotton-padded jackets and were walking back and forth on the crunching leaves. Yu Xiang sat in front of the mercury mirror and applied lipstick. She chose several colors, but she wasn't satisfied. After wiping her lipstick several times with a handkerchief, her lips were slightly swollen. She was an adult once again, unlike her previous life when she was 18 years old, hiding on the top floor of the sanatorium with her brother and drinking beer in the cold wind. In this life, she had family members who loved her dearly, friends who accompanied her day and night, and a grand celebration. Staring at herself in the mirror, she suddenly felt as if she had been cut off from the world for a lifetime. "Miss, try this orange one. There's some malt sugar in it, so it's very sweet." Lulu picked up a box of lipstick. Things from ancient times were good. They were completely untainted, and even the creams and lipsticks made from them could be eaten casually. Of course, rouge and foundation were excluded. Yu Xiang sighed faintly. She used her pinky finger to smear a little lipstick on her lips. The sun hadn't risen yet, so the sky was just beginning to turn white. Tao Hong held a candlestick to illuminate her. The girl's delicate and beautiful face was as beautiful as a blooming peony flower after the makeup. Her black hair cascaded down her shoulders like a waterfall, and her large and round cat eyes were unfocused. She looked ignorant and pure, or perhaps a little confused. Lulu asked in a low voice, "Miss, you don't seem to be in a good mood today." "No, I just feel that I've grown up overnight. I'm a little confused. After growing up, there were always all kinds of troubles that came one after another." Yu Xiang thought as she pursed her lips and spat out a mouthful of turbid air. Lulu smiled and didn't say anything. She picked up a fine-toothed comb to help her master comb her hair. At this moment, Yu Pinyin slowly walked in through the morning dew. Behind him was Mama Feng and a few maids who were holding small boxes. Tao Hong and Lulu hurriedly went forward to greet them. "Brother, are these the hairpins, coronets, and hairpins I'm going to wear today?" Yu Xiang stretched her neck to take a look. "Yes, see if you like them." Yu Pinyin walked over and touched her cheek. The maids opened the boxes in their hands and lined them up on the dressing table. The lotus-shaped coronets made of top-grade jadeite and gold looked extraordinarily luxurious under the candlelight. Even the experienced and knowledgeable Yu Xiang couldn't help but exclaim in amazement. "Do you like them?" Yu Pinyin leaned over and asked with a smile. "I can't like them more." Yu Xiang picked up the boxes and kissed them twice. Because there were too many people around, Yu Pinyin resisted the urge to kiss her and had the maids bring the boxes to the matriarch to see. These things were supposed to be taken care of by the deacons. However, the 2 deacons that Yu Xiang invited were of noble status and were only here to join in the fun. In the end, Yu Pinyin and the matriarch had to personally take care of them. She suddenly regretted the decision she made that day. This was her one and only coming-of-age ceremony in her 2 lifetimes. If someone messed it up, she would also mess up that person. Yu Miaoqi helped Mother Shen manage the household. Later, she took over Marquis Yongla. Although there were occasional small problems, with the Lin clan's guidance and Yuxiang's previous rules as a reference, it wasn't difficult to deal with them. However, the coming-of-age ceremony was complicated and the scale was grand. Even the Lin clan was holding it for the first time. In addition, they destroyed most of the rules set by Yuxiang. Because they supported their trusted subordinates, they offended some of the more reputable stewards. It was fine if nothing happened on normal days, but when it came to such a ceremony, chaos appeared. Chapter 94. There was a shortage of people everywhere and everything was in a mess. Yu Miaoqi wandered around like a headless fly for a long time before picking out a few servants to clean up the various passages. The old Tai Tai stood in the corridor and looked at the noisy courtyard. She shook her head and sighed. She wants to get close to the crown prince with just this bit of skill. She overestimates herself. Mama Ma didn't dare to respond. Seeing Master Ho slowly walk over with Miss 3, she immediately went to prepare breakfast. The crown princess met the 9th princess at the palace gates and headed straight for Marquis Yongla. The 9th princess threw herself into the crown princess's arms and asked, "Saw, have you recovered?" The crown princess stroked her rosy cheeks and said with a smile, "I'm much better now." Even though it was hard for her to get pregnant due to the damage to her foundation, she had given birth to a pair of Lin's sons while bathing in the light of the Tao. It was more useful than 100 children from the concubines. Adding on the sudden death of Su Ce Fei, the Shu eldest son was in her hands. Wouldn't she be able to do anything to him? She had thought that she was at the end of the road, but it turned out that there was a silver lining. How could the crown princess not be happy? How could she not be grateful? She even had the thought of taking Yuxiang as her sworn sister. Later, she was worried that the emperor and the crown prince would suspect that she was trying to rope in Commandant Yu, so she gave up. "That's good. This glutinous rice cake is for you to eat. I heard Mohu say that the ceremony of coming of age is very time-consuming. Let's eat something to fill our stomachs first." The 9th princess broke the cake in half. She spat out one half and stuffed the other half into her Cao Cao's mouth without any explanation. The crown princess was almost fed into her nostrils. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she snatched the cake and slowly ate it. After eating, she wiped her hands and asked, "What is the appearance of Yuxiang's twin sister? What is her personality?" When Fenger and Liner were 1 month old, she seemed to have visited the Fu, but I don't remember. The 9th princess carefully thought for a moment and then crisply said, "She's very strong. She's unparalleled in the world." The crown princess was shocked. "Unparalleled in the world? What do you mean? Shameless people are invincible. She's already invincible." The 9th princess imitated Yuxiang's mocking tone. The crown princess wanted to laugh, but she held it back. She looked at the 2 maids sitting in the corner with a questioning look. The 2 of them understood and whispered into her ear that Yu Miaoqi was trying to get close to the 9th princess and the crown prince mansion. Because Yu Miaoqi was Yuxiang's twin sister, she naturally had a good impression of her. No matter how gentle and pleasant the second miss was, how could she compare to the feelings of the 2 siblings who had gone through life and death together? Yu Miaoqi felt even more humiliated, but her expression became even more calm and tranquil. She slightly lowered her head so that the crown princess could take action. However, Yu Pinyin, who was sitting at the head of the table, suddenly stood up and walked towards Yuxiang. He reached out and pulled her into his arms. He said, "My younger sister is not feeling well. I will take her back to her room to rest first. Please forgive me." Everyone turned to look and found that Yuxiang's face was indeed deathly pale. Her lips were dry and cracked, and her forehead was covered with fine sweat on such a cold day. It was clear that she was very ill. The crown princess hurriedly waved her hand, quickly take Xiang'er back. Servants, take this princess's invitation to summon the imperial physician. A palace maid hurriedly left, holding the hem of her dress. The matriarch couldn't sit still and wanted to follow with the help of her walking stick. However, the Lin clan grabbed her arm and pleaded in a low voice, "Mother, Chier's hairpin ceremony hasn't finished yet. If you all leave, how will others look at her?" The matriarch hesitated for a moment and finally sat down slowly. However, she still felt anxious and uneasy, and her expression was very ugly. The crown princess also lost interest. After putting on her coronet and hairpin, she hastily said a few words of congratulations and called it a day. The ninth princess and Fan Jiaojiao were like two grasshoppers. If it weren't for Madame Fan and Madame Min holding their shoulders, they would have already jumped out to find Yuxiang. On the other side, Yuxiang lay on her brother's shoulder and stammered, "Big brother, can you hold me in a different position?" If he held a child in this position, wouldn't that stain his sleeves? Moreover, he was wearing a white robe for the first time today. The red in the white was simply too eye-catching. Yu Pinyin followed her words and switched to a different position. His footsteps became faster and faster. "Does your stomach still hurt? Don't be afraid, the imperial physician will be here soon." "I'm not sick." "Don't call the imperial physician." Yuxiang grabbed her brother's collar and begged with a sad face. "You're in so much pain that you're breaking out in cold sweat. How can you say you're not sick?" Yu Pinyin's tone was very bad. He hurriedly stepped into the small courtyard in the west wing and asked Tao Hong and Lu Lu to help lift the bed curtains. He bent down and was about to put his sister under the covers, but she hooked her arms around his neck and refused to let go. A layer of red appeared on her pale face. "Don't mess around. Hurry up and lie down under the covers. Look at you, you're shivering from the cold." Yu Pinyin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. When Yuxiang thought about how her menstrual fluid had stained her brother's sleeves, she wanted to dig a hole and hide in it. She felt uncomfortable and embarrassed. She gritted her teeth and asked, "Big brother, you usually like to wear black. Why aren't you wearing it today? If you were wearing it, would I be able to cling to you and not get off? Didn't you say that you like to see your big brother in white? That's why I'm wearing it today for you to see. Be good. Hurry up and lie down under the covers." Lulu stuffed a few hot water bottles under the covers, so it's very warm. Once it's warm, your stomach won't hurt anymore. Big brother will stay here with you. Yu Pinyin coaxed as he bent down to put her down. "No. Put a black cotton cloth under me first." Yuxiang closed her eyes and looked as if she was facing death calmly. I'm not sick. My first period came. Hurry up and put a cotton cloth under me so I don't dirty the mattress." She vaguely said the word, "first period," but it still drilled into Yu Pinyin's ears without any hindrance, causing his entire body to stiffen.